I'm Caroline Dowd-Higgins. Thank you for listening to Your Working Life, my podcast series featuring thought leaders in the career and personal growth arena. You spend a significant portion of your life at work, so I'm on a mission to provide you with tools, inspiration, and resources so you can enjoy your career and love your life. And I'm delighted to welcome my very special guest to the show, Michael Lee Stallard. Michael, welcome.
Hi, Caroline. Thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm so excited to talk about your brand new book, and I want to tell the audience all about you. Michael Lee Stallard is president of E Pluribus Partners, a leadership training and consulting firm based in Greenwich, Connecticut. He speaks and teaches at a wide variety of organizations, including FCB, Google, Johnson & Johnson, and the MD Anderson Cancer Center, and NASA, to name just a few. And we're today going to talk about his incredible book, Connection Culture, the competitive advantage of shared identity, empathy, and understanding at work. So, Mike, welcome. I'm really excited about this book, and I want to ask you, what is connection culture, and what prompted you to write the book?
Connection culture, Caroline, is well, first of all, culture. Let me define that because it's interesting.
Please.
When you talk to managers, and leaders, there's such a variety of thoughts about what culture is. It's almost become everything.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
what we do in our work is, first of all, we define culture as the predominant attitudes, language, and behavior of a group, whether it's an organization or a team within that organization. There's also a culture in the home. And but we focus it on those three things: attitudes, language, and behavior. So just a quick example: an attitude you find in all top performing teams is that excellence is essential, it's important. And they may use language that reinforces that. So for example, I think of some groups I've seen. I remember one company had a sweat the details product development meeting. And I love that. You know, there's a phrase that reinforces that attitude. And another company I think of had, I heard a phrase, they would say, we strive for perfection but settle for excellence. So those are examples of language that reinforces that attitude. And of course, there have to be behaviors too. There have to be, say, for example, feedback mechanisms and metrics and fail-safe processes in place. That's just an example of an attitude, language, and behavior that is aligned. So that's what we focus on in terms of culture. And there are three types of culture that we just simply call control, indifference, or connection.
Great. That makes sense. So how about the book? You know, what was the impetus for writing the book? I mean, clearly you've defined culture, but there was enough material there to prompt a book.
Well, there were several things that happened. One, I worked most of my career on Wall Street, and I saw that a lot of mergers were not working. There was a very rational plan going in. But then when the parties came together, Caroline, they didn't connect. And that failure to connect sabotaged the post-merger performance, our ability to execute the plan that was in place going into the merger. And it got me really interested in what culture is the best. And it also made me think, Caroline, about my own experiences in life. There were times when I was eager to go to work and the hours flew by, and there were other times where I didn't want to go to work and the hours passed ever so slowly. You know, what was the difference? And I didn't change. It was the culture. There were things about those different experiences that affected me and my energy and enthusiasm. And it just really led me down this road of focusing on culture and ultimately writing Fired Up or Burned Out, and then the second book, Connection Culture, to help leaders create connection cultures where everyone feels like part of the team.
Well, see, I love that. And, you know, in the career development realm and the leadership training realm, we've all heard of the catchphrase, and I'm going to paraphrase, but culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? Because the truth is you're satisfied in your work environment because of your professional values being met. And I believe that also reflects the culture that you're in. So let's start, Mike. I'd love to pick your brain a little bit. Why does one need to be intentional about finding a workplace that has a connection culture?
Well, Caroline, what we tend to do is when we, as human beings, we drift away from connection. You know, connection really requires intentionality. And people feel connected when they have a good fit with their their job is a good fit with their strengths. They feel connected to their teammates, their supervisor, their organization, its mission, its values, its reputation. And it really requires intentionality to build those connections. Now, in today's age, there are two types of disconnection cultures, and they are the cultures of control, and that's where those who have power, control, influence, and status rule over others. And I think most of us have experienced those times in life. And then the growing culture in America is the culture of indifference, Caroline, where
Mm.
people are just so busy, they don't take time to build supportive relationships, and so they feel unsupported, left out, and alone. And that's a very bad place to be from a biological standpoint, and it affects organizational performance.
And you know what I find fascinating too, when individuals are on the job search or they're looking for a new opportunity, they don't often investigate the culture. Those are questions that they don't ask, and I think it's essential as you consider new organizations, for example.
It really is. And I'm so glad you said that, Caroline, because I mean, I think about my own daughter. She graduated from TCU in Texas within the last couple of years, and her first job offer was from a company that when we checked it out, we actually talked to somebody who was in that field, and his advice was don't let your daughter go to that company
Mm.
because it has a very toxic culture. And they were offering her, big bucks, and they were talking about, just all the great things they would be doing. But when we looked under the surface, we discovered, we saw a lot of negative reviews on Glassdoor.com, and we
Yes.
thought we better talk to some people in the industry who know about this company, and we found it wasn't a healthy culture. Now, on our the book website, connectionculture.com, we have a 9-question culture quiz that will allow people to, if they answer those 9 questions, it'll give them a pretty good indication of, are they in a culture of connection? Are they in a culture of indifference or a culture of control? And it's so important to do that if you want to thrive in your career. And of course, culture at work affects your life outside of work also.
It does. It's pervasive. There's no doubt about it. And I'm thank you for sharing the story about your daughter because you and she were certainly proactive and pursued your due diligence to really find out what are others saying about the culture because quite often you can't glean that in an interview scenario.
That's right. You really have to do some research. And if you can network through just other contacts you have and try to find people in the industry to see what they say about the culture. It's great to look at things that are online. Now most organizations' reputations are a mouse click away.
Yes.
So with a little bit of research, you can find out a few things and get a sense of, is that a healthy culture or perhaps a culture of indifference or a culture of control? And of course, all organizations, Caroline, have a mix of these cultures.
Right.
So you really need to, as much as possible, meet the people you're going to be working with and try to get a feel for, when you look at the 9 questions on the culture quiz, it'll give you a good sense of the types of issues you should be looking for.
So what if I'm just imagining that several of our listeners are saying, "Okay, I'm not looking for a new opportunity perhaps, but I'm not in a great culture," right? So what happens if you're in that situation now and you're not working in a connection culture? Can you rehabilitate that?
Well, you can, and that's the good news. Every time I'm speaking in different places, I almost always get the question, doesn't this have to start at the top? And that's ideal if it starts at the top, but oftentimes it doesn't start at the top. I recently wrote about one of our clients is Foot Cone Belding, the global advertising agency. And when they were going through a period of struggle, they're an outpost in their organization, it's called Foot Cone Belding New Zealand, had a leadership change about the time they were going through some disruption in the overall business. And they brought in a leader named Brian Crawford, who did an amazing job of changing the culture. And they became the #1 advertising agency in their market and one of the top 20 advertising agencies in the world. So culture can change. It's really local culture or subculture that's the most important. And that's where you can have an influence. Some of the things we talk about in the book, we have a very simple formula. Leaders communicate an inspiring vision. If they value people and give them a voice, it creates a sense of connection. And you don't have to have formal leadership authority. It's ideal if you do, certainly, but you can influence your peers, and certainly in an area like valuing them. Getting to know their interests outside of work, looking for ways to help them. That starts to create connection cultures. So In the book, we have 15 building blocks to create a connection culture, and probably within those 15 building blocks overall, there's probably 75 different actions you could take. So there are a lot of ideas for how you could start to create a connection culture among the people you work with on a day-to-day basis.
And that's what I love about the book. It's got so many practical resources and action steps that you can put into practice in your own life today. So it's easy to follow, and I'm all about action steps. So I thank you for those very specific resources. So Mike, my next question might sound odd, but is it possible for a person to be over connected?
That's a very good question, too. These days, I think people are feeling overconnected in a different way, Caroline. They are getting barraged with emails and texts. And of course, we're signed up for newsletters that are coming out. There's so much information overload these days. And that's a form of connection, certainly. But it's not the kind of connection we're talking about. We're really talking about a sense of intimacy and trust, so you know that the people around you have your back. And that requires getting to know them as people. It requires for you to be dependable, to build intimacy so that they know you. It requires you to really focus on doing things that are not as much in your interest as in their interest. And of course, when you do that, people have a tendency to serve you as well. And that's what creates the connection culture. It's not a quid pro quo culture where everybody is dishing out favors, looking for favors in return, but they're really trying to serve and help and support one another. And that creates that sense of connection. And of course, it always comes back to you even more than what you give out.
And I love that you also said it's not just top down. Certainly that can help, but this can be lateral connections, right? And a connection culture need not just be from the boss downward. Can you elaborate on that?
Yes, and that's a very interesting point because the Gallup organization came up with some very interesting research. What they found was they have a Q12 employee engagement survey. It's basically comprised of 12 questions. And the question that's the most predictive in terms of employee engagement is, do you have a best friend at work?
Yes.
Now, I've met a lot of corporate leaders who say, how can you hold me responsible for creating best friends at work? And I agree with them. It's not something they're really going to be focusing on. But if you create the culture and encourage people, it will start to happen. And when you look at just the way we're wired biologically, when we have supporting relationships, we're less prone to be in what we call the stress response. And the
Yeah.
stress response is when our body it perceives a threat, Caroline, in the environment in some way. You're in an environment that's not safe.
Right.
And
It's fight or
so,
flight.
fight or flight, exactly. So the body starts to reallocate blood glucose and oxygen to the heart, to the lungs, to the big muscles. It's preparing to fight or flee, just like you said. But it's also depleting other body systems. The brain gets less blood glucose and oxygen. The digestive system, so we're more prone to upset stomach and colitis and acid reflux, situations like that. Also, the immune system is compromised. So we want to put the body back in a state of homeostasis so all the body systems get the blood glucose and oxygen they need. And that happens in a place where we feel safe. And that's why these supportive relationships in the workplace are so critical. If you're drained by the end of the day because you're in stress mode all day, that is very unhealthy. And it's going to affect your productivity, it's going to affect your health, and it's going to affect your happiness. And it'll spill over and affect your loved ones too, because you bring it home with you, unfortunately.
As I said, we spend a significant portion of our lives at work, so people deserve to be happy and thrive. So knowing that the end result is to thrive and have more well-being and happiness at work as well as at home, what can we do? What kinds of actions can we take to become better at connecting?
Well, here are a couple things to consider. Now, an individual who has managerial or leadership authority, one of the first things I recommend is, I call this the trifecta of connection because it really touches on the three things. We focus on vision, value, voice. And one practice actually brings all three. We call it the knowledge flow meeting or process. And that's where you get your team together, you talk about your priorities for the year, why they're important, how you expect to get there. Then you ask them three important questions. What's right? What's wrong? What's missing from my thinking? Now, the cynics are going to say it's just another manager trying to get buy-in, but the truth tellers they'll cut you some slack and they'll speak up and they'll share some things that maybe you don't want to hear, but you need to hear to make the best decisions. So just be quiet, listen, don't criticize, take it all in, and think about what may make sense to implement, and then give people credit. When you start to do that, what you're doing is three things. Number one, because you're having those conversations, you're bringing more clarity of vision about where you want to go as a leader. Number two, you're showing you value them because you're valuing their opinions and ideas, and you're giving them a voice because you're listening to and considering their opinions and ideas. So there you have it, vision, value, voice. That creates a strong sense of connection. Now, there are 100 different behaviors leaders can implement, but that's one that really hits on all three. Now, if you don't have managerial authority, there are some other simple things you can do. Just taking the time to get your colleagues out to lunch, even.
Yeah.
We all need that human connection throughout the day energizes us. If we find some people we work with, taking the time to get to know their interests outside of work, looking for ways to help them, things like that. Ways to express appreciation and encourage them. But being proactive about those things will create that lateral connection among people who work together but don't have managerial or leadership authority.
Wonderful. Michael Lee Stallard, what a joy to have you on the show. Your book is Connection Culture, The Competitive Advantage of Shared Identity, Empathy, and Understanding at Work. So tell us, Mike, how can we buy the book? And I know that you are very active in the social media space, so how can we follow you online?
Yes, you can. You can go to, first of all, connectionculture.com. That's where you can take the 9-question quiz. And we have sample chapters on there. You also have links to all the online bookstores. So that's probably the best place to go is connectionculture.com. But we're on, like you said, Twitter, LinkedIn. You can find us on all the social media spaces too.
And you have a fantastic blog as well at michaelleestallard.com. So I want to make sure that we mention that. Mike, thank you so much. What a joy to have you on. I wish you great success with the book. It has been transformative for me, so I appreciate this terrific resource.
Well, thank you, Caroline. I appreciate that.
You take care and have a great rest of the day.
Okay, you too.
And I want to thank you all for listening to Your Working Life, where my goal is to help you design your career destiny so it doesn't happen by default. True career and life satisfaction is possible, and it's time to embrace what you love doing so you can do more of it. I'm Caroline Dowd-Higgins. Take good care.